started my first day talking about enormous patterns and traced possible patterns of man around the earth in the terms of his ability to get around the earth and manipulate the principles operative in nature, and I traced a great deal in the terms of the ship and the seas. We've been through a long review of ways of thinking, because we noticed in that earliest picture of man around the earth how it is probably true that a very, very few men, and almost no men, such a minority, really were able to monopolize the basic information regarding big patterns, and by virtue of the bigness of Earth itself and the lack of mathematical capability of naked man, naked man around the Earth thought of the Earth as flat, and he was illiterate, and he did not understand then the way in which you would accumulate information and make memory, in a sense, continuous, and that the few then monopolized the continuous memory and what it had found out. And then I began to talk about events where the grand information of the grand masters who kept their information secret, how the information gradually began to leak out as algorithms disclosed the capability of the cipher to position numbers, and showed how everybody could multiply and divide very readily, as they could not with the Roman numerals, and how Matthew Fontaine Maury gathered together the information from the skippers of ships from all their logs and began to piece together an around the earth picture of the ocean currents and the winds, which unquestionably the old masters knew about, but they kept it in very, very secret ways, either in their heads, from keeping it from word of mouth, or extraordinary secret legends, none of which we know about today. At any rate, there's been a gradual life in the terms of what would happen if you had none of the tools you have today, and you were back in the naked wilderness condition, and all you could do was be a berry picker, and possibly, if you stop picking berries long enough to make some tools to kill another animal and find some way to eat it, you're going to have to take an awful lot of time. You're going to get awful hungry just investing that time. You find that your time is the only capital you have. You have your whole life to invest, and you find yourself extraordinarily preoccupied with many negative factors, just trying to catch up with yourself. I'm quite confident that what we will really call basic capital, or the real wealth of man, represents the magnitude of his potential wealth, is the magnitude of the time he has won for himself to invest arbitrarily and consciously in forward anticipatory ways. That's a very extraordinary kind of a new arrangement for man on earth. I'm just enough of the old world. There's been so much mechanics coming in my day. As I was a boy at school, we had furnace, we had interior heating, all right. What I would consider to be real wealth. And I'm sure if we can find out a little more about wealth and the way we may understand our economics a little better than we do. I am convinced that by virtue of the relative innocence and ignorance and the enormous acceleration of the nonsense that we've talked about, I'm suggesting to you that there is enough, and that our whole economic system is a very indirect one. And that if instead of saying, I'm going to first become preoccupied how I'm going to earn a living, then I'll become a specialist, which seems to be a good way of earning a living, I suddenly say, I'm going to learn all I can learn, but I'm going to find out what are the tasks that need doing, and if I start doing them, I might be able to, the interlinkage of doing things that nobody else is attending to, the interlinkage might bring about such a new synergetic level of capability of man that the wealth thus generated might be so powerful that you're like a boss. Prime design. Prime design is then the conceiver of the project. And I don't see any reason at all why the designer, the architect, comprehensive anticipatory design scientist shouldn't become a prime designer and continue to be a prime designer, because I find in medicine there is prime design. The doctors, if they simply never did anything till somebody asked them to do it, really would never have been in very good condition. Why? Because in the early days of doctors, a very powerful man, the king and so forth, is in trouble. He's in a mess. And the doctor discovers how to get him out of the mess for the moment, but he realizes that he's dealing in palliatives. And he realizes that he's going to be in trouble again, and the king's going to blame him because he's in trouble again. So he says, if I could only keep him from getting into trouble, he could think more of me. And I just tell him, I'm a man who tells you how to keep out of trouble. And so he begins to be anticipatory, and the doctors began to discover that there were annual things that occurred. There were recurrences of plagues. They began to discover there were enormous patterns, and they could be anticipated. So they began to realize conditions under which various things would happen. Therefore, they began to be what we call, they developed some anticipatory medicines just to kill rather than they go fast to move in. So they're glad to put up some more funds for research, and you live in sort of sublime idea that you have a good time, and I think that's really true. But I think at the comprehensive design level, there's something much, there's nobody to help us, and the only thing we can do is to help ourselves, and that is, certainly while you're still students, but at the time, in the sense of paid for, the spaces here, there are tools, and up to this point, society is really accrediting you with the opportunity to join as prime design teams, and tackle some enormous problems where you don't lose your comprehensive capability, because you must understand what the whole thing is, but you keep reporting to one another, and by virtue of your understanding the whole is being tended to, you are willing to play a team part and to and play on the team with the thing that you happen to do the best, whether this may be good, you may be a good telephone conversationist, or you may be a draftsman, or whatever it is. You may be like that on the weighing scales or something. But as teams, you can then tackle problems that are enormous. And I would say one of the problems you ought to tackle is how to design various apparatus that would make it possible for men to start voting in a way that becomes logical and be able to vote wherever they are, and so that there are going mandates all the time. There are a certain amount of voting kind of things go on. The stock market is one of those things. It's economically paced, and it's very tries such a differentiated out way of thinking about something we'll call wealth. Because I say, what we really mean by wealth as industrial wealth, the new kind of wealth, has to do with the way in which we are altering the total pattern, our total ecological capability, our ecological domains, over and above that which we could handle nakedly on our feet as just wild man and berry picker, fish snatcher. I feel that the wealth gets down, by everything we know, down to certain very simple kinds of fundamentals. First place, as we sweep out more of the earth, from our viewpoint, we say we're sweeping out more of the earth. The fact is, there is less universe outside of us. We take in more of universe. In taking in more of universe, we are taking in more energies. We're engaging more of the patterns of universe. So one of the things we do is then we begin to take the waters that are, the sun is picking up those waters and making vapor, and then they're floating in the skies of clouds, and then they're getting precipitated coming down in the mountains, and the water starts running down the hills, and the water on the way to the ocean, with the gravity pulling it in towards the center of the earth, trying to level it down, we capitalize on that, and we run that water through secondary patterns for irrigation. We run it through wheels to do work. And we get patterns that are operating around us called canalized, channeled into preferred patterns. We begin to shunt. Shunting is angular modulation. We got down to a while ago that angular and frequency modulation is a basic design. One of the things we do when we irrigate and run water courses, we shunt it into the preferred patterns, which is angular modulation. And then we let it come through the wheels, and we come through in certain frequencies, whether it be the paddle wheels, and so forth. It has something to do then with what I said, comprehensive anticipatory design, conscious design. Right? what goes into that comprehensive anticipatory conscious design? We will deal with the physical universe, and we will then deal with the physical universe as energy, and as energy we will deal with it in two ways. As the energies which tend to get into the local shuntings as the various chemical elements, as something we'll call mass, and as the energies which tend to dissociate, which we call radiations. These are two kinds of energies we'll use. And I will take those who tend to come into masses, and I will organize them. I'll take them out of the ground where they occur as metals in patterns that are not useful to me, and I'll rearrange them in patterns that are useful to me as various alloys. And I'll make them into cams and levers and so forth, so I can do more work with my lever. And then I'll take the energies which are operative as radiations and so forth, and try to focus them. Instead of being omnidirectional, I'll try to beam them into directionality, and then I'll concentrate these forces, and then I'll get those beamed on the end of my levers. So I can arrange them, angles, which is, and a beaming is then an angular modulation again. And you can valve it off and on, sort of frequency. So I can get it coming on the ends of my levers when I want it to come on the ends of my levers. And I can get them. Patterns are operative outside of me, such that the water is running down the hills and ending on the ends of levers, which a water wheel is simply a series of levers, one after the other. And I will valve it into presence to do more work, to get more of the metals out of the ground, to win more energy for me, by which I can get into more metabolic plowing and developing. Therefore, I begin to reorder the patterning around me to make the patterning work out in such a way that the probability of my living out my days is greater than those around me, so that life can regenerate. So I say there goes into this well energy as mass, energy as radiation, which be Einstein's equation of M and C. These are the two kinds. And so you might write wealth instead of saying E equals MC. In fact, W equals M times C, the second power, which is radiation. And then I would say the next thing that interests me very much, what goes into the developing of these kind of tools? And as we get more of the tools, then I say that I can not only anticipate during the tasks that need to be done, I recognize the things that are going to happen to us, and I've anticipated those, and I get nature working as pattern in itself to make it work for me, so that the things tend to regrow where I like them to grow. And this gives me more time to think about more anticipation. So what I am winning is back capital. My capital is how much of my lifetime do I have the right to invest? I think that'd be the biggest capital kind of consideration. But talking about the physical wealth, then, I would say it has not only energy as mass, energy as radiation, but what else goes in here? Oh, what is this? There's something else about it. Me, my experience. You can't create and none of it can be created, none can be lost. Energy is something that continually grows. Experience is something that always grows. It's quite a fabulous affair. So long as we live and experiment, we learn more. Therefore, if wealth is our experience, our subjective experience is converted into objective capability as anticipatory design science, by virtue of which we order the patterning which has been around us in non-preferred ways into preferred ways to do more work for us, gaining more time for ourselves, then I say very clearly to me that the energy part of it can't be destroyed, but the experience part of it increases. Therefore, wealth is something that can only do one thing. Just like it can only be articulated forwardly, it can only grow. It's a very extraordinary thing to learn that wealth can only grow. People who talk about you're squandering or wasting your wealth, I think don't know what they're talking about. I think in terms of yesterday's very great insecurity, you of course ought to be scared of somebody doing something. But I'm at the point now where I'm quite sure that there's no way we can really actually, this wealth cannot be deteriorated, or the only thing we can do is be really willfully ignorant and pay no attention to our experiences. But we have, every time we use this wealth, every time we make a new pattern, every time we try it out, we're going to create very much more wealth. We'll build more and more tools. Objective is completely by generation, by letting the seed blow around. We're designed to be able to advance and retreat. We have to have this stimulation and response, and democracy is very ideal for us, but we have to get ourselves geared up in the industrial, we have the industrial tool being able to speak to us, but we're not being able to speak back. going to have to find a way of speaking back. That's the design challenge. Next thing, I'd say, I'd like to get to the point that we're in a very fabulously complex picture. But the point is that we're playing a game that has absolutely no meaning. It's in the terms of yesterday's banker who no longer exists. And so we really have a form of hidden socialism which is very extraordinary, because in the whole industrial equation, the one thing that is essential of man to the industrial equation is that there is a consumer. Automation is coming and coming more and more rapidly, and very soon man has absolutely no function as a machine, reflex machine, and a lifting machine. And he's going to be replaced not only as worker, but he's also going to be replaced as executive, because the calculating machine can do a very much better job than his opinion, time and again. So that the man is going to lose his job to the machine very generally. In this great industrial equation, where the networks get more and more complicated, the anticipatory design undertakings become so complex that their funding takes something like the aircraft industry of the world at the present moment. After 50 years of being subsidized by all the nations of the earth as being the swiftest, greatest flying weapon history had ever known, being the number one weapon, $2.5 trillion were put up as capital money to establish the tools. It's an enormous tool complex where the end tools actually stamping out any particular design of plane is almost negligible. It's an enormous tool complex of generalized tools able to handle anything. And that great tool capability, which is regenerative around the world, can only keep on, it can be established, $2.5 trillion, only in the terms of the numbers of people that it serves. Now, it's not going to serve you as a weapon, that tool capability. There's something else it could do. It can serve you as a consumer. And if there's a basic relationship of man to the industrial equation, which is that the more consumers there are, the more you can divide up the original cost. As consumers, and we have to have people on the payrolls in order to have them consumers. So there are all kinds of payrolls. So when Roosevelt said to the corporation, we will let you have 10 to 12% profit, he immediately meant that dividends could be declared out of funds that were put up by government, which is exactly, this is socialism. But it meant then it's a very fancy kind of socialism. So if you own some shares and you belong to the club and so forth, you're playing bridge, and you don't think of yourself as on the dole. You don't think of yourself as sort of some dependent on the social system. The point is you are. But it's so beautifully hidden that nobody is kicking at all. And so then we get to the point where the corporation said, the newspapers who are handling the news said, we're not going to support this New Deal at all unless the government does something about us. And we're going to be all against it. And the corporation said, we're going to declare all the profits we can, and the government said, we need you to put some of your profits back into research. It is not tax. If you don't tax the fellow, you let him keep the money. It's just the same really as if you handed the money, isn't it? It's what I call indirect subsidy. So there's $7 billion goes to the advertising houses, and they give it to the various newspapers and magazines, and newspapers and magazines don't want anybody to catch on about this, so they don't talk about it. If they do know about it, I don't think America really understands. I don't think there's really any conspiracy or deceit. I think it's an enormous picture going on here, but it's one which very few people really understand. The point is then that we have all kinds of secondary subsidies by which a great many people are on payrolls, because they're working for the newspaper or whatever it is, and all of it looks like it's quite sort of familiar in the terms of yesterday's ways of playing games in this old static one-town world, not one-town world, little town worlds and buggy and on the feet. I was very eager to get this into the picture for you. It may be necessary, and as designers you've got to recognize necessary. I don't look upon anything I'm saying to you as being any malevolence or, as I say, conspiracy or meanness or trickery of our men. It is really a pattern that's so big, and so people have been so preoccupied locally, and because you're not comprehensive thinkers, lack of comprehensive thinkers, it doesn't really make this possible to be seen. And the government kind of man doesn't tend to be that kind of comprehensive thinker. And so you got a whole lot of men on the government payrolls, and so that's another way. getting consumers. Just consumers are being funded by this enormous game playing of circulating money on a circulating system two ways, and all the time it is just you and I and our abstract bank accounts, all in the terms of leverages and energy. Now, I would say to you as comprehensive designers, you have to consider whether it is necessary. If you're a reformer, maybe I'm not going to write books exploiting the fact that I can see how it is going on just to have kind of a shock book and get something out of it. Don't talk that way. But I do think it's absolutely necessary, if we are going to be really comprehensively capable, that we see what it is that goes on and be extraordinarily attentive about how we tamper or try to remodel the patterns of men. There are poetries in here, there are emotions, there are fabulously complex factors that are operative, and it's doing all right. But don't let ourselves be fooled about the inadequacy of democracy and the give and take kind of voice that we must be able to produce together uniformly in respect to our total experiences. And I'm really confident what I have said today is that I have really disclosed to you what wealth is and the way it is articulating in our system. And the Russians have copied us in many ways. They say they have socialism. They're really much more capitalist than we are. What they've done is they really recognize that we have really now we have a federal capitalism. We have the government doing the main risk. It is going to set up. It's going to invest its capital in fusion into such extraordinary things as taking the atom apart. And put $80 billion into it, in comparison to the $40 billion of gold. Just in this one country, no, put $80 billion into it. It's quite a capital investment. We're making these enormous capital investments. So I say in Russia, they really do it as a state. There's state capitalism. We have state capitalism here, but we pretend that we are old individual capitalists, sort of a hit and miss kind of an individualism. We have possibly less individualism. Are walking around going into the bank as we the people, because I thought that would make a good one. Yes. Really completely unconscious to the American public, even to the government operators, not even thought of at all. The fact is that we actually have no bankers with something called money in their bank, which they loan to enterprises. But we have, because of the New Deal's arrangement, that the people that put their money in the bank, and we as people put our money in the bank, and we as people, but as government, guarantee our money in the bank. We say we're going to guarantee those bank accounts. Then we, as government, go over here and we take a little money out of your bank and we loan it, and we pay you some interest for it. We loan it to ourselves as the people over here to make our houses a little sounder, so our mortgages be more valuable, so that then we guarantee the mortgages, and that makes our books in the bank look better. Then we now have our bank's books looking pretty good, and the corporations say to the government, we don't want to do business with you unless you allow some profits. So the government agrees, we will let the corporations have 10% profit, 12% profit. So now we as government, in order to, because there are no bankers anymore, to say we will now take our money and put it into starting steel companies and railroads and new things, going into the atomic business. We as government have to do it, but government's not supposed to be in business. So we say to the corporations, we give you an order for $40 billion worth of armament. And the corporations say, all right, we need a lot of money in order to go into such enormous order, and we need some money for payrolls and for buying tools and so forth. So the government said, all right, you go with the bank. So we as a corporation then come back over to the bank and say, all right, we'd like to borrow some money for this business, and the bank said, all right, we'd be very glad to let you have it. It's just the digits of the people, but we'd set up a credit for you. We have $100 million that order, so that we then go back here as a corporation and we manufacture the goods and we deliver to the government. Now they say to the government, please pay us. The government doesn't have any money, so we as government come over here, we come back over to ourselves as people and say, lend me some money to pay the bill over here. So we take the people's bank accounts and we move them around here paying interest, and we pay the corporation. The corporation pays it back into the people. And each time the bank keeps making some more money on it. The consequence of this is that the banks, who have nothing they can do with their monies outside of pay a certain amount of dividends to the stockholders of the bank, except then they get so much interest coming in, somewhere around this national debt interest annually today running into enormous billions, we say 7 to 11 billion, somewhere in there. That billion, 7 to 11 billion of interest can only be spent really by the banks in making more banks and competing with each other for more of the bank accounts, so that all the banks begin to go into more and more branch banks, build more and more buildings, take on more and more vice presidents, and this way we arrange to get a great many people on payrolls as bank clerks and vice presidents, and the same way we get enormous numbers of people on the customer payroll, by virtue of getting some money in their pocket by taking the government money and giving to the corporation, who then gives out the dividends. And then we also, we as newspapers say, we're not going to play the game unless you let us in. So we say to the corporations, we would like you to increase your plant and structure, get more and more people on the payrolls. Therefore, we would allow you to deduct anything you spend in research from this government order, from the taxes we're going to charge you, and so we kept open. Therefore, we believe in this indirect subsidy of 7 billion. I think that's enough. That's enough? I've been in and out of we the people now.
Very good. Bucky, that's fine. All right.
All right.